Hello and welcome to our newest module, the debate speeches. This video will cover the introduction to the constructive speeches and debate, so you can be the most persuasive and thoughtful speaker in your rounds. As a lesson preview, this lesson will cover first, what constructive speeches are, 2, the components of a constructive speech, and 3, important tips regarding constructive speeches. So the first question that you should probably ask yourself is, what are constructive speeches used for? Now, these constructive speeches are the opening speeches of a round. And these speeches lay the groundwork of arguments that determine how the rest of the round will play out. For example, if you introduce an argument about single-payer universal healthcare being accessible in the first speech, then the rest of the debate will center around and gravitate around this one argument, and even if the negative brings up other arguments as well, this argument will stay the same. However, your constructive speeches should be the only speeches that can be 100% scripted out in the entire round. The last thing that you should probably take in mind is that these constructive speeches are the first time your judge hears you speak. So, as always, first impressions matter on the judge, so make it count. You should probably make it as persuasive and clear and concise as possible so your judge can understand what you're speaking and what your arguments are about. Now let's talk about the components that make up of a constructive speech. So the first thing that you should probably have at the top of your constructive speech is a short but powerful quote about what you're defending in the round. The second component that you should have is an I affirm or I negate statement. The I affirm or I negate statements will be followed by either the resolution or what you're defending based on the topic. The third thing that you should have after the I affirm or I negate statements are the definitions. These definitions define the key and most important terms of the resolution. For example, if the resolution was something like resolve the United States ought to implement a single-payer universal healthcare system, then the definitions or the key terms that you should probably define is a universal single-payer healthcare system. Now, it's important to define these key terms of the resolution, because if they don't know what you're defending in the first place, then they won't understand your arguments as well. So it's always important to have definitions. The fourth thing that you should have in your constructive speeches are observations or burdens. These observations or burdens are usually what the AF or neg has to do in order to win the round. For example, if I was on the affirmation side, I would say that the burden of the AF is to prove why the policy proposal is a good idea. Now, these burdens are really important because it tells the judge what kind of threshold that you need to meet in order for them to vote for which side. Now we are going to talk about important tips regarding constructive speeches. So the first thing that you should always do is to talk slow, because if your judge can't understand you, then they can't vote for you. You should also clearly look at your judge. If you're an online debater, then you should probably look at your camera. But if you compete in person, then that means you should always take your eyes off of your laptop or your computer or your piece of paper and clearly look at your judge, because you always need to convey that information to the judge, not to your computer. The second thing that you should keep in mind is to emphasize the big numbers. Some examples of big numbers include statistics, percentages, or even big quantities in general. Now, these big numbers are very important for you and your case, because if you have these big quantities, it tells the judge what part of your case is specifically important. But if you don't emphasize these numbers, then the judge will most likely miss them. So it's important to look at your judge and clearly emphasize why these big numbers matter. The third thing that you should keep in mind is recent evidence. Recent evidence is key for evidence comparison. For example, if the affirmative says that marijuana addiction is at an all-time high right now, and you as the negative say that marijuana addiction isn't that high right now, these two arguments are completely different, meaning that these two arguments have different sets of evidence that is backing the argument up. But in order to choose which argument is important, a good filter to see which arguments are the most important is usually when the evidence was written. If the evidence was written 1 day ago, that means that that issue is very prevalent in today's society. But if it was written 10 years ago, that may not apply to our society today. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you understand and learned the most important tips regarding constructive speeches and how to form your constructive speech in order for you to make it the most persuasive, compelling case in the entire round.